Okay, so if I can have your attention for just 15 more minutes, we're going to talk a little bit about public space place assessment. So how do you really make the case for public space improvements? How do you really understand what's going on right now, what could be done tomorrow, how to improve a public space, and everything that we've sort of crunched together here in 2 days. Sometimes you can get all the wonderful people together in the same room, other times you can't. So there are a lot of different ways to understand how a public space is functioning, and there are a lot of different ways to understand what could be done to improve them. So we're just going to go over a few of the strategies that, you know, at some point in the lifetime of Project for Public Spaces, we've used and applied. And this is also sort of a learning thing for us, because we look at what other people are doing and kind of, you know, keep evolving our own process of public engagement. So there's some of the things that, my laptop's too far. Oh. Yes, that'll be great. Thanks, Sophia. So some of the things that PPS has done in the past are listed here, starting with the observation of public use. This is really how Project for Public Spaces was formed. I know we talked about William Hawley White yesterday, and what he really was doing, he was observing the life of public spaces in New York City to make a case for what's working and what's not working, and what could the city do better. So the work of PPS is kind of applied research that started with Hawley White. So observation is a very important technique. You can make the case for more funding. You can make the case to take something apart and take it away, and all sorts of things when you have a document that is based on real life activity that was happening in a public space. So that is observations. Then you can find out a lot. 21st century, there's a lot of information on the internet. So right after you go to a space and you observe what's going on, it's always good to go back and check the web resources and see, you know, if you're talking about an intersection, just to go back in time through the internet and see if at some point that intersection used to be different, or if at some point there was an accident there, or if at some point there was something done to make it the way it looks today. So use the web resources to the benefit. And then you can behavior map. So this is another sort of, it's a way of documenting your observations. So putting pen to paper and mapping the behavior that you see in a public space. And we'll look at a couple of examples of that as well. And then there's time-lapse filming. With the power of the iPhone, you can now do that without being in the space at all. You know, you don't need the small cameras anymore. Nobody needs to be plugging in battery and making sure that it works. You can have the iPhone with a portable battery and tape it all up with an actual rubber band or a tape or whatever, and leave it, as long as there's somebody to like look after it and things like that. So you can actually record things over a long period of time and make it into a time-lapse video, so you quickly, you know, like cartoons, you see what's going on where. And iPhone now lets you actually do a time-lapse, so that's great. So that's a filming technique. Then there's tracking and counting. There is, you know, actual counters that you need somebody to be in a space to do pedestrian counts, like click, 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 pedestrian counts or bike counts. Every time you see a bicycle go by, you click. But there are a lot of other ways to do that now. There's like, I was just in Portland, and we were looking at this metal frame that they put in the asphalt, and what it does is every time a bike goes over it, it sort of identifies the spokes of the wheel, and it knows that one bike has passed. So 1, 2, and the Department of Transportation is actually keeping those counts. So there are a lot of different ways to do counts, but it's a very powerful thing to have a number to something. I personally am all about qualitative research. I'm all about expressions and words and, you know, things that people say. I'm all about conversations and interviews. But for a lot of people, numbers work. So counting things can be very powerful as well. Surveys, we all do these in different forms. We use social media for it. There are a lot of different ways of doing it. The last one we did was using a tool called SurveyMonkey. It's an online-based, free-to-use tool. Just getting people to answer some very basic questions, keeping it not as complex. Just keeping them simple is very important. We just did the power of 10, so I don't want to do that again. We did the place game yesterday, and there is a sister version of the place game. It's called Street Audits. It has to do with streets, and we're going to look at that in a second. And pop-up placemaking. This is about being where people are, and we're going to look at a couple of pictures of that, and I'll tell you where that's from and what we did. But pop-up placemaking is about, you know, being where the other people are and then talking to them in space. And then connectivity exercise, which we're actually going to do. So you have one more exercise left. It's only going to take 10 minutes, but we're going to do the connectivity exercise in a little bit too. So all of these, for us, during all of these observations, we are trying to achieve the same thing. We're trying to understand how a place is functioning. So those 4 key elements that we looked at yesterday and that are at the back of all the place games you filled out, those are the elements that we're going to be looking at no matter which process we use. So let's say we went to a place and we want to start observing it. Next, please. So why do you want to observe it? You want to collect data. You want to see how it functions as a place, if it functions as a place or if it doesn't function as a place. It can be used for site assessments. It can be a very strong form of data. It can be useful to identify issues and problems. What is not working, the problem, the red dots. It can be very powerful to identify those. And it can also be very powerful to see the people that are there, the groups that are using this, and how the built environment responds to the moving body, how the human relates to the built environment. You can understand this, that. And then if there are design features, if there are actual amenities in a space, whether they're working or not working, or whether you just need to shift some things to a different location, where do you place what? So you can observe and you can actually make decisions about that. So first is behavior mapping exercise. We're going to look at that. So this is a very simple behavior mapping tool. It is on our website. You can find it in a lot of different places. And what you do is you look at everybody that's passing by a space. So think of a little intersection. So if there's a single person passing by, you're still going to consider that a group. That's a group of 1. And then if 2 people are walking by, that's a group of 2. So you want to understand how many people are going through a space, what was their gender, and what was their age group, because that's very important for us to document. Then what were they doing? If there was a stance involved, were they sitting, or were they standing, or were they leaning against something? If they were leaning, that's how you know that there's a need for a bench. And if they're sitting, that means the bench is working. And if they're standing and there is a bench, the bench is probably in the wrong place and they don't want to sit down. So you want to know what they were doing, whether there was shade or there wasn't any shade. If there was an activity involved, what activity was there? And you always want to leave a column for other, because there's not enough room on any piece of paper to document all the kinds of activities that people could be doing in a public space. So just put an other column and document whatever people are doing. So very simple form.
Nidhi,
and then,
could I ask you to move over to the other side? Awesome. Thank you.
All right. And then you want to tie that form to an actual physical map. This is actually our backyard in PPS's office backyard. And we did this exercise with a group for a training that we host. We host regular trainings about placemaking, and a group did this. So what do you want to do when you write a group, what the group is doing, what is their age ranges and all that, the activities and blah, 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 blah. You want to tie that group to where they were standing, because without this is useless. Without you knowing where they were leaning, you don't know where to put the bench. So it's important to combine that documentation with an actual map that people can look at and then find out the patterns for. And this is what a filled out form looks like. This is our fantastic intern at that time, Eric, who went out and did this for us, but horrible handwriting. The good thing was he went ahead and typed it also, so I didn't have to do that. Time-lapse photography. We don't have internet, so I won't be able to show you what we had there, but it collects data over long periods of time when you can't be there. It documents behaviors and changes throughout the day. Very important for Isla Vista, I guess, because you talk about the day life and night life of things. So time-lapse could be a very useful thing. And you don't need an in-place researcher. You don't need somebody to be there, because we know that billable hours and hours of work can be a tricky thing. So this kind of technique just lets the technology take over, and you don't need somebody in place all the time. And it's most suitable for busy places where you don't have you can't stand with a clipboard. You do a time lapse. It works in places like, sorry for the bad example, Times Square, or your Del Playa on a, I don't know, Saturday night, whichever night's the busiest. You can be there filling something out, but if you do a time lapse, if you find the 3rd floor of a particular apartment building and there's a terrace and you can put a camera there and align it the right way, you can walk away as long as you know that that camera is not going to walk away. So you don't need somebody to be, maneuvering through crowds. And it captures mannerisms. Now this is very important. When you're when you're typing and writing something, you can't really say that, you can't capture the smile. You can't really capture the little kid trying to like wander away from his mama. You can't do that. But when you do a time lapse, it gives you this giant database of still pictures that then you can use for any kind of reference. So you can actually capture moments and people's expressions and mannerisms, which is it's the little subtle things. And there are a wide variety of affordable gadgets now available to do that. So it's always worth checking on the market what's going on and what you can use to do that. But there are some cons. The data analysis is a problem. If you have to look at those 24 hours of video film to then, document behaviors, it's a time-consuming process that somebody needs to be on it. It could make for a great thesis or dissertation project for UCSB students, but it's different. And it becomes a project of its own. The analysis becomes a project of its own. The gadgetry needs to have a home and it needs to have a steward. Somebody has to take care of it, that the camera is there and the battery is not dying, so somebody should check on it every couple of hours. And if your iPhone got rained on, then everything's gone. And you're never gonna get that particular day, time back again. That day is gone, that time is gone, and now your iPhone's data is gone. So there are some risks involved in, like any research. This was a time lapse of Bryant Park, the corner, long ago. But then you can, no, it's okay. We don't have internet here, so go to the next one.
No,
We do.
We have
We do.
internet.
You do?
Yeah.
It's up there. The code's up there.
I was trying to connect to it. It won't let me. Won't even ask for a password.
COSBGS1.
Okay, we'll look at it later. We'll let it play.
Cool.
But it's a little time lapse of Bryant Park. And then this is what some of the outcomes, when you actually document in a paper, it can be documented in several forms. You can find out where people are going, where people are cutting through. If you need a mid-block crossing, it can tell you where exactly you should put the crossing based on people's behavior. We think that we build it, people are gonna come, but people are resilient to that, so people do what is convenient for them to do. So behavior comes first, the built environment comes after. I studied anomalous psychology. This is the rule of thumb for me, that if you make a corner at the end of the sidewalk, there's a corner, but there's a way for people to cut around it, you see a diagonal path. You can't force people to go straight and make a left turn when they can actually turn around and go in a circle and make that same turn. So documenting behavior it ensures that whatever you design will be more responsive to people's actual needs. So you documented things like that, and then you place it on the map, and you know what, this is the most prominent channel, this is where we're gonna put the crosswalk, and then we need a refuge outlet there because people are just kind of cutting through, that's where a lot of traffic is, blah, 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 blah. So you can base your decisions on that. And then if you do all that, it's time consuming, it is labor intensive, you need to buy equipment and stuff. If you don't want to do all that, you don't want to spend 7 days in the field collecting all this data, you can take the other approach, in which you can just ask the community, you can ask the experts. So that's why this time we were not here for a week documenting everything that's going on all of us, though we're just asking you guys. So you ask the community. So you can do pedestrian surveys. If you're thinking of capturing all the people on skateboards and bicycles who are not respecting the automobile or whatever, if you want to talk to them, it'll be difficult to catch them on a normal, regular day. It's better to catch them when there's a street festival or an event or something going on. So at a teeny tiny table where all the bicyclists are going to be passing through and skateboarders are going to be passing through, small table, very simple questions, easy for them to answer because chances are they're not going to stay with you for more than 2 minutes to reply. So having a little station and doing smaller, like mini surveys is important. And if they're interested, you can always give them like a card or something for a longer survey, and if they're interested, they can always respond back. But don't try to capture them with the long survey, short's better.
We also like to do this at happy hours in public spaces. People get a ticket, they have a beer while they're waiting for a beer, they do the dots and things like that. So that's
just like we got you guys yesterday. There was jazz and there was food, and we're like, please put a dot.
Put a dot.
So yeah, and then power of 10. You've already done that, the map's right behind you. The easiest way of understanding if you are a consultant or if you are the one applying for a grant or if you're a student, it's very difficult for you to know what the community's favorite spaces are, where they go and what they do. You just go out and ask them, and the very simple things. You give them dots, you give them a map, and you ask them where they like to go. So power of 10, and then you can document that in something like this. So that map can be turned into something like that, where you can actually do the red, yellow, and green, and you can label what was what, so you actually have something on paper to take to the next level. Place game, we already did that. I'm not gonna, you can just flip through it. We did that yesterday, you compiled it. Pop-up placemaking. Let me tell you a little bit about this. So today, we came up with all these ideas for your places. You know, we have 10 things that we could change about a Stero Park, or 15 elements that we need to add to the upper loop or lower loop. Now you only have $10,000 to implement things. You don't know what to prioritize or not prioritize because you are only a small part of the group. You want to know what to prioritize, you want to know what the lowest hanging fruit is, and what to do first. So, of all those 10 items, you put a picture next to it, make it very visual, and then you put it on a poster board, and you take it to the community and ask them to vote. Again, the power of the dot.
Dotocracy.
Dotocracy.
Every dot is equal.
Yeah, so if you, just like we asked you to pick your 4 sites this morning out of the 10, you do the exact same thing. You put all the 10 items on a board, poster board, and you give them 4 dots and say pick your favorite 4. And then you count, and whichever ones get the most votes, those are the things get implemented. So pop-up placemaking is a way to take all this back to the community in a comfortable environment. Again, think festivals, think farmers market, think outside the co-op, wherever people are. Find them where they are and give them this fun exercise. And maybe put a little incentive into it. If it's a hot day, free water. Or if it's the time for evening snack, a little baggie of popcorn, something. Give them a little incentive and ask them to stop just for 1 minute. And that's a very democratic way of finding out what you want to do. And then that's also a good way of capturing the voices that were not heard. So in this case, we had another board next to here, which you can't see, which had a place for additional ideas. So if nobody was involved, somebody was not involved before, or they couldn't make it here today, you just still give them an option to contribute. Yes, you had a question?
Well, I was just thinking, in all of the spaces that we worked on today, we could put up a post, a picture, and a QR code, and that could be easy voting for people walking by.
Exactly.
And a sign that says, vote here for what you want in this space.
Yes, exactly. So giving people a yes or an A is very important. They feel like they've contributed.
And also that you have, this is where the web is important, because if you're like, would you like an interactive fountain here? You sort of go on the website and get a really nice photograph of a really nice interactive fountain, so that people can visualize what you're talking about. So the image it's of something that you think is a particularly good example of that particular idea.
Yeah. The images here are very powerful. That's why the voting area is as big as the image itself. So it's very important to do that.
And it's also great if you are in a community where not everyone speaks the same language, because this is very visual.
Yeah.
And it's not verbal, so people can understand and
Yes.
put pictures on things.
And then this is what I was telling you. So this is a different place, different exercise, different project, different place, and done in a different way too. So the setup is different. The first picture you saw was actually a folding indoor partition, and we put all the poster boards on the partition so that we could collapse it and take it around. This was actually, there was a home. So there's a tent, and then there's poster boards underneath it. This has a physical dominant presence, and people walk through it, so easy circulation. But this is what I was talking about. There's room for additional input. So people who were not involved before, and people who don't want to pick out of the 10 things that you've put on the poster board, give them a place to write the 11th that they can think of. So still keeping the element of, you can still contribute, you can still tell us what we missed, and we'll be happy to include it. And then you get all sorts of fun ideas, using a lot of colors. So the question on the top said, additional ideas, what did we miss? But instead of having a flip chart, in that case, we had sticky notes that were all different colors. So just like different handwritings, and and then there were some dots lying around. So people didn't want to, they wanted to be lazy, and they didn't want to write out the same idea twice, so they put their dot on top of somebody else's idea. This is +1. So it's just, and this is very powerful. You can take this picture and you can show this is somebody's handwriting and somebody's put in the effort to think about an idea and give us their input. Streets as Places audit. This is Place Game's sister that I was telling you about. The tool looks very much the same, but this is it's street focused. So as Cynthia was telling us yesterday, 80% of any large city's public space is in the streets. So this is a tool to really look at the street as a public space, from the public space perspective. So it has similar format, it has similar kinds of questions as the place game, but it's street focused, and it just opens up your vision from the asphalt to everything around. So, if needed, we can share that with you. And this is what you're gonna do today. So, connectivity exercise. What this asks you is, on a big scale. So that map that Kim is standing in front of, you have the smaller versions of those on your tables. What we want you to think about is, what are the missing connections? Like, these are physical connections I'm talking about. Places you want to walk to, but you don't have a physical connection. All those, beaten paths and dirt trails that start showing up in a community are desire lines, are desire paths. That's where people want to walk, but there isn't an actual path. So we want you to tell us, and this is going to be quick, because whatever you understand in the first 10 minutes is all we want to know. The prominent missing things. And then if there's a major barrier, sometimes those major barriers are train lines. Other times those major barriers are freeways. So what are the major barriers and what are the missing pieces? Two things you're going to do. Missing pieces is blue. Major barriers is black. Missing pieces is blue. Major barriers is black. Only two colors.
Blue and black on your table.
Does anyone need
So we're going to do this, and let me show you what other people came up with. So you can sit for another second. And this is Hyde Park, Vermont. So with the community, a connectivity exercise in which the green is automobile connections and the red was pedestrian connections, where it exists and where it's missing. So the dotted is where it's missing and the solid line is where so you don't have to worry about that, but people get very creative with this exercise, and this is the quickest way of finding out what streets should you be closing, where are those street closures, where are people trying to get and aren't able to. So that's the connectivity exercise. Can you
Or where the trails should continue.
or where the trails should continue, and then you can use that data to actually create maps for new proposals and things like that. Where should a roundabout be going? So this map is actually documenting where is the need for a roundabout, where it will be most suitable according to people's needs, and then where are the connections between the automobile asphalt road and the pedestrian trail, the pathway. So where are those missing connections that need to be made? So it was used to create a lot of recommendations. So see, zooming in, this is a location that was proposed by the community that we need a roundabout there. And then where are the missing access points? So the red is the pedestrian connection in this case. And there are other more creative ways of doing that, and we didn't come up with this. Like I said, this is a constant learning exercise for us too. This was actually Cynthia and I last year in Houston, Mississippi, and they did a connectivity exercise with yarn and thumbtacks. So they had a big map, just like that one, but you could put thumbtacks in it, and people used yarn to put between thumbtack to thumbtack based on their connections. So go to the next, you'll see the infrastructure that they used and what they came up with. So all these lines are the connections that people got really creative with.
This was also Mississippi State University architecture students.
Yeah, and they built all that, the structure that the board is sitting on, they constructed all that in their lab. So everybody was very emotionally attached to this exercise. So this is what we're gonna do. Let's see, do we have anything else? And this is what it could look like in a polished form. So the yellow here is the major, and this is in Denver. So the yellow here is major barriers. And what that is highways, overpasses, and train lines, and abandoned trail yards. So look at the blue, where the connections need to be made, and the massive amount of barrier space, that's a massive amount of yellow that's in there. So it's powerful tool of documenting community engagement, community input, and you're looking at the same things. So it's, and this is when we also zoom into our 4 pieces. So I just have these 4 brackets from our place game in here, but again, this is to reiterate that while you're observing behavior, you have this framework to analyze everything you observe. And this has, nitty-gritties, it has intangibles. What can you measure? What can't you measure? So no more images. This is, place game behind your place game. I just put it in a larger format. But yes, connectivity exercise. That's what we're doing.
Can you explain that once more, the color that we use? Or is it
Yes.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is you're going to use the tiny map. I have the Google one, but that one.
There should be enough for everybody.
This is the map you're using. You're putting a tiny paper of trace on it. Blue is the missing connections. Where would you like to go? What are the A's and B's that you would like to connect? And we're looking at the pedestrian. The bicyclists seem to be doing okay. We do not like to give priority to the cars. So blue is the missing connections for pedestrian. Black is barriers. Which is your most major arterial that stands in the way of you walking from point A to point B? Got it? I can type it up and put it up there if that'll help.
Do it right on